Iran has begun preparations for renewed war with Israel by tightening coordination with the Hamas terrorist organization as it attempts to rebuild the axis of evil in the Middle East, and Israel is the country that it has set its sights on. But the IDF's battle against Hamas continues, with an added warning to either agree to a deal to release the remaining hostages and move to a long-term ceasefire or be crushed. However, Washington is not giving up on negotiations, as Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is scheduled to arrive in the region in the coming days to try and bridge the gaps. For its part, Hamas has told the mediators it is freezing negotiations because of Gaza's hunger, while the Arab states have had enough, telling Hamas to stop making excuses, release the remaining hostages, and blaming everyone else but itself for its failures in the negotiations. As a footnote, the Hamas Political Bureau is considering a move to Tehran in Iran amidst fears that Doha in Qatar is becoming less safe for them. And speaking of less safety, the Houthis in Yemen have begun to issue threats to Saudi Arabia, saying that there will be no immunity for anyone who serves Netanyahu. On Israel's northern front, there is a question about whether Hezbollah might already have collapsed after one sentence from General Secretary Naim Qassem that reshuffled the cards. And next door in Syria, Israel is insisting that the south must remain demilitarized. During a recent meeting between Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and the Syrian Foreign Minister, Israel clarified that this is a red line, while the United States insists that the local ceasefire agreement be preserved and that all sides guarantee it. And amidst all of this, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan quietly continues making moves to tighten his grip on the Middle East. On the diplomatic front, Israel got some more bad news overnight between Wednesday and Thursday as Cabinet Prime Minister Mark Carney joined the pressure on Israel by announcing that Ottawa will recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly meeting in September with a surprising condition. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. The IDF has completed most combat objectives in the Gaza Strip and severely damaged Hamas's underground network, but now awaits a political decision. The Chief of Staff this week presented 3 options for the next phase. And meanwhile, a Hamas source told the Saudi channel El Hadat that the organization informed mediators it is freezing talks because of Gaza's hunger. Reports from Gaza speak of dozens killed and wounded by gunfire near the aid trucks, but a security source says that no casualties were found from the IDF fire, while attempted rammings by the trucks were detected. And meanwhile, Hamas is becoming deeply unpopular in the Arab world, even as its popularity soars in the West. Egypt blames the terrorist group for provocations and stubbornness that prolonged this war, while Jordan is furious over its meddling in national security affairs. The United Arab Emirates warns of a poison of a dangerous ideology, while Saudi Arabia declares that Hamas and its leaders don't listen even to Allah. For its part, Israel has sent Hamas a tough message: without progress towards a deal, the response will be severe. Yet, amidst the wide gaps, Trump's envoy to the Middle East will arrive in Israel in the coming days for last attempt to bridge the differences, advance hostage talks, and end the fighting. We will also meet Netanyahu and tour the American GHF humanitarian aid facilities. Meanwhile, a warning about annexing the perimeter has been passed on to the mediators, along with Israel's reply to Hamas's demands. A political source notes a clear change in the tone of negotiations, as the mediators are now blaming Hamas for stalling. And in related news, security officials say that Iran is renewing ties with Hamas and trying to sabotage a deal, and tension is rising between Hamas and several Arab states over its efforts to inflame Arab streets. In wider regional developments, there is growing evidence that Turkey is moving aggressively to expand its regional influence. Syria has begun receiving gas from Azerbaijan via Turkey in a new cooperation that is meant to shore up Syria's power grid. The move highlights Ankara's growing regional role, while Damascus tries to project control after unrest in Es-Saweda. Speaking of which, Israel is warning of an attack from southern Syria by pro-Iranian militias. And according to an Israeli source, talks with Damascus aimed at demilitarizing the area, but Iran may try to exploit the situation to plant a new threat. And speaking of Iran, the Trump administration has announced fresh restrictions on the Islamic Republic and related firms to pressure it towards a nuclear agreement. The sanctions target more than 115 bodies, entities, ships, and even a close aide to the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And in a related story, a former Iranian ambassador to Germany recently revealed that Moscow refused to supply Tehran with its most advanced S-400 air defensive systems. Yet a new report claims that Iran has conducted a test with a system deployed on its soil. And finally, the Houthis in Yemen are threatening Saudi Arabia, declaring that there will be no immunity for those who serve Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. The missiles are aimed at the Zionists, but Abu Dhabi is on the radar. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 666 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, I call on you to keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. Israel is fighting on many fronts and winning, but in one front, public diplomacy, we are losing, and we need you. So guys, click the like, leave a comment, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now, we'll start today's report with events in the Gaza Strip. The IDF has announced a summary of a wide-scale operation in Bet Hanun in Gaza. Division 99 and 162nd destroyed a series of underground and above-ground terror infrastructures, including long-range attack tunnels that had threatened the city of Sderot, the Gaza envelope communities also, and the rail line near the border. The IDF statement said that Hamas tried to fight from within the population and the tunnels, and today it has nothing left in that location. And according to a senior officer in Division 99, Hamas avoided fighting the IDF soldiers. That shows that its ability to stay amongst the population centers and carry out attacks on the IDF forces is diminishing at this moment. This is a major change that happened in the past half year, and it changes everything, because when you work throughout and slowly, you are a bit more predictable when you're dealing with the population of Gaza. That is one of our biggest challenges today. What's important to say is that in the places where we operate, there is no more terror infrastructure. Everything is destroyed, buildings above ground and also tunnels below the ground. This is according to the IDF commander. Commanders of Division 99 on the ground say that the Bet Hanun battalion has built a very complex branched tunnel system. So they quickly blend into the population or they flee. So there are no terrorists moving freely above the ground. Those who remain are hiding underground, a few dozens, while the battalion commander is thought to have escaped an Israeli airstrike recently. It's important to point out that the IDF is now nearing the end of the military move defined for it by the political echelon of Israel and is waiting for further instructions. In recent weeks, the IDF has struck Hamas strategic assets in Gaza hard, and after nearly 2 years of combat, the IDF has learned and developed methods for fighting in the underground arena. Today, it is the most experienced army in the world in subterranean warfare. Yet, it is already clear that its next challenges in every theater from Lebanon through Syria and Iran to Yemen will involve underground fighting. The IDF will need to enlarge the combat engineering corps and build a core training chapter for how to fight in the underground arena, just as IDF troops train in urban warfare in bases in Israel, houses, and also in Palestinian neighborhoods. So, destroying the underground infrastructure of the enemy is central to the political echelon's decision-making because Hamas built its entire military capability underneath the ground. As the IDF mapped and deepened its understandings, it found hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, crisis crossing, border crossing into Israel on several levels. However, it was quickly realized that not every tunnel needs to be overcome. Some can simply be blocked, while others can be bypassed and some destroyed. The IDF operated on two main axes. First, destroying the offensive tunnel array that reaches and leads to the border fences and to the Israeli communities. And second, striking the underground highways that link different areas, enabling Hamas forces to reinforce each other and sustain their logistical network. The blow to these arrays is the mortal wound to Hamas. On top of the hits to its firepower and weapons production's capability, the IDF has also struck large portions of Hamas force structures, especially the command levels. In the end, it is clear to Israel's decision makers, and to Hamas as well, that the residents' anger and the impossibility of rebuilding the devastation is something that Hamas cannot survive. It has lost the support of the civilian population, and even the terrorist group needs that support to carry on. Israel now stands at a decision point. The Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, has already presented the political echelon with three choices for Gaza's future: holding in place, encirclement, and massive bombardment of Gaza City, or a full conquest of the Gaza Strip, including the central camps and Gaza City neighborhoods. Guys, here on Boots on the Ground, we'll keep bringing you all the deepest information about what's happening in Israel, and we will report the things that most other channels just skip. We'll explain the truth and analyze it so that you will know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So guys, hit that subscribe button to stay tuned in real time. Speaking of the truth, right now, more than ever, we need to stand together and bring God's comfort to His people. That's why we're highlighting the amazing work of One for Israel, a powerful ministry bringing hope through humanitarian aid and the gospel of peace. In the heart of the conflict, Jews and Arabs are uniting under Jesus' name, Yeshua. Their online media ministry is reaching millions, over 90 million views on their Hebrew gospel channels in Israel alone. But they're not just preaching, they're raising up the next generation of pastors and leaders at their Bible college right in the land of Israel. And right now, you can be part of it. Head to oneforisrael.org. Check out their teachings, their resources, and download their free 31-day prayer guide to help you pray with purpose during this critical time. Again, visit oneforisrael.org/pray or scan the QR code on screen. Let's stand with Israel, united in faith, and be part of what God is doing right now. Now back to the news, as a Hamas source told the Saudi news portal El Hadat this week that the organization informed the mediators it is freezing the ceasefire talks because of hunger in Gaza. And according to that source, Hamas's return to the table depends on improving Gaza's humanitarian situation. The report echoes a speech on Sunday by Hamas leader Khalil El-Haya, in which he said there is no point in continuing talks under siege, destruction, and the starvation of our children and women. Bringing food to our people in a dignified way is the real serious proof that talks should continue. This utterly absurd position taken by Hamas did not come out of nowhere. In the past week, Hamas feels it is riding a wave because of international criticism of Israel over the situation in Gaza. Hamas laid out demands that brought the previous round of talks to an abrupt end, including a deeper Israeli withdrawal than Israel agreed to and an expanded prisoner release formula. It also added a demand for broad humanitarian arrangement for Gaza, what it calls essential for progress. And meanwhile, a United States source said that President Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is expected to land in Israel on Friday for policy meetings focusing on the fighting in the Gaza Strip and efforts for an agreement. And at the same time, the defense establishment is formulating tough alternatives against Hamas, with options including annexing parts of the territory of Gaza, imposing a military government, and besieging Palestinian population centers. Defense Minister Israel Katz stressed that pressure on Hamas is growing, saying we are investing enormous efforts to free the hostages and keep constant pressure on the terrorist organizations in Gaza. If Hamas does not soon show willingness to release the hostages, it will pay a very heavy price. Security assessments now speak of a critical window of a few days in which Hamas must decide whether to meet the release demands or face harsh Israeli responses. Israel's formal reply on Wednesday evening rejected key Hamas demands, including control of prisoner lists, opening the Rafah crossings, withdrawal from the Philadelphia corridor, and removal of the American GHF aid fund from Gaza. Political sources say that gaps remain deep and it is hard to see how they can be bridged right now. And with all that in mind, Jerusalem sees Witkoff's arrival as a signal that Washington spots a window of opportunity, but also feels that senior Israeli ministers may try to torpedo the move. Witkoff reportedly plans personal meetings to drum up political support for the decisive move. During his visit, he will also examine Gaza's humanitarian situation, then continue to Qatar and Egypt for critical coordination talks before advancing negotiating stages. However, the mediators have warned Hamas of Israel's intents to annex the perimeter along the border if the group does not retract its new demands and accepts the mediators' formula. An Israeli political source says that this warning, backed by the United States, was passed along with Israel's response. Meanwhile, Arab states are furious with Hamas over its negotiating conduct and recent statements by its leaders. A senior Jordanian figure said that the Hamas external leadership keeps meddling in Jordan's internal affairs, acting hypocritically while seeking renewed ties with the kingdom. And at the same time, Hamas leader Khalil El-Haya's remarks have angered Cairo, Egypt, with political and media circles that are condemning his call to move towards Rafah as an unacceptable provocation. Former Egyptian Deputy Foreign Minister Hussein Hariri said such statements are part of a global Muslim Brotherhood campaign aimed at harming Egypt's role and disrupting its diplomatic and humanitarian efforts. He also told Sky News Arabia that the comments do not help the Palestinian cause but serve the Israeli narrative. Specifically, he said that Hamas statements are meant to cover its leadership failure and stubbornness at certain negotiation stages. This is eroding trust on the Egyptian side, but Cairo will keep working to end the war swiftly for all Palestinians, not just one faction. Meanwhile, Egyptian's foreign minister-designate Badr Abdel Anti confirmed that Cairo is training hundreds of Palestinian fighters aligned with the Palestinian Authority to assume security control in Gaza if a ceasefire is reached as part of a clear security governance plan for the post-war Gaza Strip wall. And in a related story, commentators in the United Arab Emirates launched sharp criticism saying that Hamas is not just a rogue group, it is the armed wing of an older, far more dangerous ideology, the same poison that gave birth to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Here at TBN Israel, we'll keep updating you on every diplomatic development towards an agreement. And as always, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, share, follow, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button. Now, let's continue. As the United States set a deadline for Hezbollah disarmament in southern Lebanon, and this deadline is approaching, the terrorist group has declared that it will not bow to pressure and has even raised its alert level. Lebanese security sources say that the Shiite party has prepared for 3 main scenarios and imposed strict precautions, including a ban on cell phone use amongst its operatives. Furthermore, officials told the news portal El Mudon that Hezbollah does not take the published disarmament dates seriously, seeing them as a mere spin and pressure. These Hezbollah officials further said that we might discuss timelines in talks with the state, but don't overplay them. The end of combat does not give Israel the right to impose new terms. Responding to Israel's implied threats and gearing up for possible escalation, Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem issued a series of public statements this week about the group's political standing, its weapons, and disputes with the United States mediator. In these statements, he reminded listeners that Hezbollah played a decisive role in electing President Michael Aoun and regards itself as an inseparable part of Lebanon's legitimate political system. He also hinted at Iran's role in recent events by saying Hezbollah is not solely responsible for answering Israeli attacks. Qassem also sharply criticized United States envoy Tom Barak for creating problems for Lebanon, accusing Washington of trying to impose conditions and warnings. They warned that Israel has not withdrawn from the 5 border points because it aims to plant settlements in Lebanon. This is according to him. He closed with a stark warning. Lebanon now faces an existential danger, yet stressed that Hezbollah is not the only party responsible for responding to Israeli strikes, signaling willingness, at least outwardly, to coordinate with the state and with its authorities in this confrontation against Israel. Hezbollah's jihad sources say that the group is preparing for 3 main options. First, they might have to accept the status quo in which Israel continues to make pinpoint strikes on its leaders and on its agents in the south of the country of Lebanon. But there's another possible scenario in which Israel expands its operations against Hezbollah with coordinated action against this group in southern Lebanon, in Beirut, and the Shiite suburbs without sliding into a full-scale war. Finally, there is the possibility of a renewal of full-scale war, a scenario akin to the September 2024 round and Operation Northern Arrows. Hezbollah sees the first 2 scenarios as likeliest, partially because Israel is busy in Syria and the United States is unlikely to give Netanyahu the green light for a major Lebanon war. And meanwhile, Hezbollah has improved readiness by distributing gear to Shiite villages in the south and ordering municipal heads to open mosques and halls for immediate use in the fighting resumes. Operatives are forbidden to use mobile phones to avoid interception, trying to correct flaws that were exposed during the beeper operation that Israel carried against Hezbollah last September. For now, Hezbollah signals openness to a political solution, yet reads for military escalations. Israel is watching, it's awaiting, and this is the official statement that we have on the record. Any military move will depend not only on Hezbollah's cooperation, but also on United States considerations and domestic pressure in Lebanon. For its part, Washington has hardened its stance and is now demanding a formal Lebanese pledge to dismantle Hezbollah as a precondition for renewing the talks on ending Israel's operation. Reuters reports that the United States will not send envoy Tom Barak back to Beirut without clear government commitment, and it will not press Israel to halt the airstrikes or pull forces from the south. And in a related story, at a Straightening the North conference, Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said there's a fair chance that Hezbollah will actually be disarmed. Even Khamenei is fed up with Hezbollah. He also vowed that the IDF will not withdraw from the 5 points it now holds inside Lebanon, and that destroyed Shiite villages will not be rebuilt. Guys, here at TBN Israel, we will keep bringing you the backstage diplomatic story in the Middle East, and as always, we invite you to be part of the team by sharing our videos on YouTube, following us on social media, and above all, do not forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now, we turn the news to what's coming out of Iran. An Israeli security source told the Saudi news portal El Hadat this week that Israel has concrete warnings of attack plans by Iran-directed groups in southern Syria. These Iranian-backed cells are preparing offensive infrastructure to strike Israel from Syrian soil, while Israel is negotiating directly with Damascus to prevent escalation. We're talking to Syrian regime to demilitarize the south of Syria. This is according to the source. We will not alarm harm to the Druze. The source also dismissed claims of an Israeli invasion plan, saying, talk of an Israeli thrust into southern Syria is false. We don't interfere in Syria's affairs, and talks with Damascus are going well. Meanwhile, recent meetings between Israeli and Syrian representatives in Paris were described as positive, with dialogue continuing on several channels. However, defense analyst Avi Ashkenazi reports Israeli concern that Syria's new regime may fail to curb the expanding Shiite axis, as Iran could exploit Damascus's weaknesses to restore its influence from Tehran through Damascus to Beirut. Syria's dire economic situation, with average monthly salary holding at about $30, lets Iran recruit locals for as little as $50 a month to join the armed militias. Syria's interim president, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, is likewise reinforcing his forces against threats from Iraq, Iran, and Hezbollah, relying on pickup trucks with heavy machine guns and a few old Assad-era APCs and some tanks. And amidst all of this, Israel is monitoring the developments very closely, stressing it will strike hard if attacks are launched from within the Syrian territory. And in a related story, a former Iranian ambassador to Germany revealed this week that Moscow has refused to supply Tehran with new S-400 air defensive systems. However, the media portal Army Recognition now reports Iran tested a S-400 battery deployed near Isfahan on the 26th of July, including a combat control post, radar, launchers, and 48 N-6 E-3 missiles. The report cited intelligence sources that said that local radar emissions spiked, indicating serious military drills. Tehran has issued no official confirmation to this. However, the report also said that it is unclear whether the tests were part of Iranian efforts to buy the system or if Russia deployed it as a marketing demonstration. It's important to remember that Russia did deliver S-300s to Iran in 2016. This is after Tehran paid $1 billion. Iranian officials have complained that the Kremlin is refusing to sell Iran the more advanced S-400 systems as well as Su-35 fighter jets, while offering this gear to the United States ally, which is India. So guys, what do you think about all of this? Is Russia playing a double game with Iran? Why do we think that they won't sell them the weapons? What do you think? Will China step in and sell more weapons? Let me know what you think in the comments. And in another related story, Washington imposed its largest sanctions package against Iran since 2018 this week, including 20 entities and 10 vessels for all trade, plus over 115 players linked to smuggling networks that were run by Hossein Samkhani, the son of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's advisors. Firms in India, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Indonesia, and even China are targeting in the new sanctions, with the State Department declaring that any country or body trading Iranian oil exposes itself to sanctions. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghaei called it clear hostility, yet noted Tehran will allow IAEA officials to visit for renewed technical talks, even as direct talks with the three major European powers, Britain, France, and Germany, resumed last week in Turkey. Guys, here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you the most accurate information about Israel and the Middle East region. So stay tuned to the truth in real time by clicking the subscribe button if you haven't already. Give this video also a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to share it with your friends. Now, let's continue. While Israel, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and other regional powers are making moves to try and bring the war in the Gaza Strip to an end, Turkey is quietly making moves of its own. This week, Syrian Energy Minister Mohammed el-Bashir announced that Syria will begin receiving natural gas from Azerbaijan, routed through Turkey to Aleppo starting on August 2nd. The initial supplies will be about 3.4 million cubic meters, enough for roughly 900 megawatts of power, which is a significant boost of Syria's battered grid. The deal, signed this month, covers energy coordination, gas supply, oil exportation, cooperation, and the Turkish transit. But the gas route also underscores Ankara's expanding role in Syria. President Erdogan seeks deeper influence in the north, uses infrastructure that deals to tighten Turkey's grip, while Damascus strives to show control after unrest in Essaouira. And meanwhile, aid convoys enter the south to protect the state authority. The position of the Turkish energy links in the north and the Syrian aid moves in the south highlights Syria's fragile, complex landscape as competing powers for control in that country. It's also worth mentioning in this context that Turkey has some very good reasons for wanting to stabilize Syria, including the millions of Syrian refugees that it has hosted for the past several years. Ankara would very much like these people to go home to Syria, and there are also over 1 million Syrian refugees living in European countries who might also want to go home back to Syria. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we'll keep reporting on all these issues. So guys, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to TBN Israel YouTube channel. Next, we shift the focus to the Houthis in Yemen, who are still launching attacks and threatening Israel and anyone who does business with the Jewish state. Senior Houthi official Hazem al-Assad lashed out at Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates this week, declaring that our missiles target the Zionists, but we don't miss Abu Dhabi and Riyadh's conspiracies. Any action by your tools in Yemen under the banner of suffering which you caused through aggression and siege will meet devastating strikes. No security or immunity for those who serve Netanyahu. This is according to the Houthis. He was probably referring to the internationally recognized government of Yemen, which is backed by Saudi Arabia and controls much of the south and the east of Yemen, while the Houthis rule the northwest. Finally, we conclude today's report with a look at the growing shift in diplomatic circles towards recognition of a Palestinian state. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney joined the pressure campaign against Israel on Wednesday evening, announcing that Ottawa will recognize a Palestinian state in September at the United Nations on one condition. The Palestinian Authority must hold nationwide elections without Hamas and ensure the new state is demilitarized. Carney said that the Palestinian Authority's reforms are mandatory and that he spoke with President Abbas, who held the historic decision. Despite the unusual conditions, Carney also blamed Israel for allowing the Gazan disaster to develop. Despite these conditions, Israel rejected the move as harming the ceasefire and the hostage release efforts. It's important to remember that British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has likewise threatened to recognize Palestine in September unless Israel meets his Gaza-related conditions. French President Macron earlier voiced the same intent, and 15 other nations have now signaled readiness to recognize a Palestinian state. Israeli United Nations envoy Danny Danon blasted the move, while our hostages rot in Hamas tunnels. These countries issue hollow declarations instead of freeing them. They legitimize terror and hurt the peace. However, it's not all bad news. Earlier this week at the United Nations meeting, the Arab League, the EU, and 17 other governments signed a joint declaration condemning Hamas for the October 7th massacre and calling on it to release the hostages, disarm, give up power in the Gaza Strip, and end the war. I wonder what the Arab League knows about Hamas that the governments of France, Britain, and now Canada appear to not know. In any case, here at TBN Israel, we'll keep reporting on every development in regards to Israel and this wider Middle East. As always, we ask you to keep spreading the truth, and guys, unite in prayer for this situation. This is a spiritual war, very complicated, as you've seen me talk about it for a long time. And we need help. Definitely, our leaders need to make the wise, godly decisions. So let's unite in prayer for them. Let's unite in prayer for the hostages to be released from Gaza. Let's unite in prayer for the IDF soldiers that are fighting evil terrorists. Let's unite in prayer for the Palestinian people, the innocent Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. Let's unite in prayer for everybody that's affected by this terrorist regime. And let's keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and for God's will to be done in this land.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at TBN.